John Denver, the keynote address, discussing a personal perspective. Recorded live at the Windstar Foundation's Choices for the Future Symposium, June 12th through 14th, 1987. Beginning.
Welcome to these Rocky Mountains. Welcome to our second annual Windstar Symposium on Choices for the Future. Most of what you've seen up there is from last year and things that have occurred since then, ending with the presenters that we're going to have here for you this weekend. For myself personally, as your host, as one of the founders of Windstar, I'm thrilled to be here again. I've looked forward to this all year. Last year when I came on the first morning, I was scared. And I've been looking forward to it ever since. See if I could be scared again. And I am a little bit, I guess. I'm more nervous talking to people than I am when I'm singing for them. But that passes very quickly. And the point is, I have looked forward to being with you, and I thank you for coming. I welcome you with all my heart, with great love and respect for each and every one of you, and for what collectively we are. So, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is to tell you some of the things that have happened since last year, some of the things that you've seen there. The Choices for the Future video, which some of you, how many people were here last year, by the way? Yo! A special welcome to you, yours and your return. To all of you new folks, you have no idea what you're in store for. The Choices for the Future video, which was made last year, has been shown in over 100 locations nationwide. That in itself is pretty exciting to me. The communique was delivered to President Reagan, Secretary General Gorbachev, Pope John Paul, and through the Windstar, and a video that I made to also to Deng Xiaoping and to other world leaders. The State of Our Planet presentation, which those of you who were here last year saw, has been presented in Seattle, Denver, Ashland, Oregon, and Atlanta, and another place in Carolina I'll think of in a minute. The Windstar Journal, 3 issues have been published. They've been distributed to Windstar members, subscribers, and through bookstores across the country. They have been sent around the world to various world leaders, as I said. Biodomes, we have 3 in operation, the 2 down at Windstar, and 1 now that's working in Carolina. All kinds of things have happened since last year. The Ted Turner and WTBS held the Goodwill Games in Moscow. Ted was one of our presenters last year. Peter Bourne and Associates launched a new magazine called Development International, providing development professionals with information for improving quality of life in developing countries. Choices and Connections Networking Catalog, I'm just picking things here, published in Boulder, has gone out all over the country. There's some people in the audience who are here not to present this year, but who were presenters last year, Jerry Jampolsky and Diane Cerencioni. You may remember, especially from their presentation of Children as Teachers of Peace. They have been all over the world, to China, to the Soviet Union. In fact, I was in the Soviet Union with them last year. Most recently, they've been to Central America. You might remember, those of you who were here last year, an incredibly moving event in Jerry and Diane's presentation when a young boy from Vietnam, whose name is Nguyen Vu, talked about how it is hard to wage war on one's friends. And what the Teachers of Peace program does is join together children from different parts of the world, giving them the opportunity to become friends. Wes Jackson's here this weekend. He's a far-out guy. He has the Land Institute in Kansas, and while farming, doesn't seem maybe as dynamic or as exciting as an international tour, it is the basis of life support and economies. Wes has got a wonderful program going on there. I'm really glad he's back with us. Amory and Hunter Lovins are here. They have the Rocky Mountain Institute, which is our neighbor down in Snowmass, and I talked to Amory last night briefly. He's on his way to the Soviet Union to talk to them about more efficient electricity and its relationship to security. The Soviets are very interested in that, as we are. Rusty Schweikert and the Association of Space Explorers had their international meeting last fall. Astronauts and cosmonauts from 16 nations attended. Robert Mueller has begun his work at the University for Peace in Costa Rica. All kinds of things that came from people who were with us last year. All kinds of things I'm sure will come out of this today. And I'm excited not only to hear the presenters, what they have to say, some of whom are old friends who got me started, in a sense, on this particular path that I feel I'm on. To all of you, once again, a very warm welcome, with appreciation for your being here, appreciation for the people who put it together and given us this chance to begin, to do this again. My sincere gratitude. Dennis Weaver, who was in the invitation that's sent out, is not able to be here this morning because of a television show that came up for him that he couldn't say no to. I recognize that in people's life, sometimes come up and you just can't say no. He made a difficult choice, but did what he really wants to do and what serves the kind of thing that he's doing all over the world for us. And I support his being where he is, and in his absence, it's my great pleasure to give you a personal perspective. I wasn't going to get to talk this time. I was just going to be the host and introduce people. So I'm actually very grateful to Dennis for giving me this opportunity. There is beauty above me. There is beauty below me. There is beauty all around me. I walk in beauty. This is an Anasazi Indian saying. It goes back some time if you know about the Anasazi Indians. Another little thing that I wanted to quote from one of our Windstar journals, shared with us by our friend Dick Darnell, and for him, Sitting Bull. See, brothers, spring is here. The earth has taken the embrace of the sun, and soon we shall see the children of that love. All seeds are awake, and all animals. From this great power, we too have our lives, and therefore we concede to our fellow creatures, even our animal fellows, even to every living thing, the same right as ourselves, to live on this earth. One of the things that we're going to be doing this weekend is discussing how to live on this earth. Yesterday, over the last couple of days, I did something that I haven't done in quite a few years. I drove from Los Angeles to Aspen, all by myself, nonstop. I actually can't say it was nonstop. It's an 18-hour trip. I managed to sleep 3 hours during, not while I was on the road, but, and I spent a couple hours working on my car. So it was a 24-hour trip. And it was interesting on a lot of different levels. The one that I want to share with you is what I was doing it for. It has always been a wonderful transition for me to come from the city to the mountains and to get the fullness of that transition. And traveling that distance on the ground, driving, is a much fuller experience. Sometimes when you fly from LA, having been there for a month, and it takes an hour and a half to get here in a Learjet, it's like a culture shock. And even worse when you're going the other way. Driving is wonderful. I had 2 very long and very, very hectic days in Los Angeles. One of the gentlemen who I was working with, who was taking me around, has this new phone in his car. And it's so far, there's a speaker down here, a little microphone up here. He doesn't have to do anything. He just talks and listens. And every time we moved from one place to another, he was on that phone. I swore to him, I'm never going to live in this city. I'm never going to get a phone in my car. Although as one who's into high-tech toys, I'm not going to put a phone in my car. The drive from Los Angeles was at its worst. The traffic, the smog, the people, the kind of tension, the color of the energy that's there is very, in a sense, dismembering. It removes you from your mind. It removes you from your heart. Driving out of the city, getting into that desert on the way to Las Vegas, a harsh and barren desert with high winds, but purifying, cleansing in a sense. Then rising into the higher country in Arizona, and the kind of changes that you see in the vegetation, a difference in the air because of the altitude. I drove through Arizona under the full moon night before last, and it was glorious. There was not a cloud in the sky, and I was tempted to turn my lights off and drive down a highway. I also stopped on several occasions and said, "Okay, this is your chance. You're never going to have a better chance than now. Come, pick me." Nobody showed up. I continued on, drove across an Indian reservation in Arizona. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, and the Navajo Indians that you see there and the way that they live, some of them still in the old ways, some of them in their adaptation to how our lives are today in this society, in this culture. And that to me was somehow a very moving experience, watching 3 men and a boy herding over 100 sheep across the land. The color of the mountains there, the rocks, and the sky yesterday was glorious. And then I came into Colorado. My favorite part of Colorado is the drive from Cortez over by the Four Corners area to here. And coming into these mountains in the full bloom of summer with colors and richness and people living with and in tune with the land and all the differences that there are in what is necessary in how you deal with the land, with the seasons. Here in these mountains, you have to live with the earth. You have to pay attention to the seasons and adapt yourself to what is demanded here. It's always a very moving experience to me, and especially to come home and what my home means to me. So I got, I could go on and I'll burst into tears here if I do. I got everything that I wanted out of my trip here. And in that, it cleared my mind a great deal, although it may not sound like it this morning. And it opened my heart more than I can tell you. And so I find myself at home with the opportunity to be with you this weekend, to be your host, and this morning to offer you a personal perspective. I would like to begin that perspective with a poem that is my favorite poem in the world. And it's very pertinent, I think, to what we're doing here in talking about choices for the future. This poem is called, and I got it from my chiropractor, this poem is the story of the ambulance in the valley. 'Twas a dangerous cliff, as they freely confessed, though to walk near its edge was quite pleasant. Till over the side slipped a duke and a prince, and it had fooled many a peasant. The people all said something had to be done, though their projects did not at all tally. Some said put a fence round the edge of the cliff. Others, an ambulance down in the valley. The lament of the crowd was profound and so loud as their hearts overflowed with great pity. But the ambulance carried the cry of the day as it spread to the neighboring cities. A collection was made to accumulate aid, and dwellers in highway and alley gave dollars and cents not to furnish a fence, but an ambulance down in the valley. Oh, I'm not going to forget it this morning, am I? For the cliff is all right, if you're careful, they said. And if folks really trip and are falling, it's not the slipping and sliding that hurts so much as the shock when they're stopping. And so on for years as these mishaps occurred, quick forth would the rescuers sally to pick up the victims who fell from the cliff with the ambulance down in the valley. Said one in his plea it's a marvel to me that you'd give so much greater attention to repairing results than to curing the cause. Why, you'd much better aim at prevention. The mischief, of course, should be stopped at its source. Come, friends and good neighbors, let's rally. It makes far better sense to rely on a fence than an ambulance down in the valley. He's wrong in his head, the majority said. He would end all our earnest endeavors. He's the kind of a jerk that would halt our good work, but we will support it forever. Don't we pick up them all just as quick as they fall and treat them with care quite liberally? A superfluous fence is of no consequence if the ambulance works in the valley. Well, the story is queer, as I've given it here, though things oft occur which are stranger. More humane, we assert, to repair all the hurt than the plan of removing the danger. Before it all ends, it's time to begin to attend to these things rationally. Yes, build up the fence and let us dispense with the ambulance down in the valley. That little poem points out a couple of things. The most specific one that I enjoy about it is what it says about choices and what it says about change. You know, it's not always correct or furthering for us to do something just because we can do it. Certainly the most notorious aspect of that, which has been dealt with this past year, has to do with the babies over here and somebody else, that whole thing. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. And quite often out of these dilemmas come very, very deeply moral, spiritual questions. The other part of the poem that I like is it demonstrates one of the things that I want to share with you that I would like to have you use to a degree in your listening this weekend. The poem is a work of art. Now, I'm sure as many people as there are here in the room, there's probably that many definitions for what art is. I would like to share with you my definition of art. Art is a window into yourself. Through your experience of art, you discover who you are. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's magic in that. Now, let me explain. When you see a beautiful painting, and it reminds you, it's a beautiful scene there, the ocean, the sun setting, the palms waving in the breeze, it reminds you, all of a sudden, what comes to the surface, and you can't stop it, you see. What comes to the surface is your memory of a time like that, when everything was at peace, and everything was beautiful, and your heart and your eyes were open to that beauty. And it comes up in a flood. When you hear a song or see a dance, and something comes up for you, that's art working. That's what art is for. And we really do begin to discover ourselves. I was asked once to make the commencement address for the high school here in Aspen. And I thought about what I wish someone had said to me that didn't happen that I could say to these kids. Maybe it would be appropriate. And what I talked to them about was being themselves, the courage that it takes to be yourself, and being open to who yourself is. And one of the examples that I use is you're in the car with your friend, and there's a bunch in the back, and you've been partying and stuff, and they pass up with a bottle of beer or whatever it is, and your friend who's driving takes it and has a big swig. Or they're passing around a cigarette or whatever, and this thing comes up in you that's just really uncomfortable about that. That's not right. Everything that you've been taught, everything that you've learned says this is not what I should do. Now, do you succumb to the influence of these people? Or do you be true to yourself? Because what you're experiencing there is yourself. That's who you are. And you know the truth. So the value of art, then, is that it shows you the truth about yourself. I propose to you that this weekend will be, for many of you, and hopefully for all of you, a work of art. I think that out of perhaps all of these speakers, the weekend as a whole, or specific things that happened this weekend, something will come up for you that's like a flood, and it's so clear and it's so there that it cannot be denied. That is who you are. Listen to that when it comes up. Be open to that happening. Don't shut it away when you start to feel it, whether it's an emotion, a laugh, a pain, a fear, or a kind of thing that says, you know, that makes sense to me. That's how I feel. I've never heard anybody say it like that, but that's how it is. You see, that's what happens for me when people come up to me. Actually, I notice them sometimes out in the audience when I'm singing Annie's song or something like that, and the guy has his arm around his lady, and he turns to her and he says, I was going to write that song. If he hadn't beat me to it, I would have. Because that's how I feel. That's what I get to do sometimes when I'm working at my very, very best as a songwriter and as a performer, is I can put it out there so really that people say, yeah, that's how I feel. One of the things that I have endeavored to do is to expand that beyond things that I'm able to write in my songs. And part of that has been my growing process, if you will, because I think I'm putting more depth, certainly more human experience and a broader experience in the songs that I'm writing today. I couldn't write I Want to Live 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I wrote Poems, Prayers, and Promises. And then 10 years ago, I Want to Live. And then a couple of years ago, It's About Time. And then last year, What Are We Making Weapons For? That's a process. You see, you keep peeling away layers, getting deeper and deeper inside yourself. You become more and more aware of the levels, the subtleties of life around you. So this is the other thing that I wanted to present to you about this weekend in regard to my personal perspective, is our ability to grow, our willingness to grow, and our commitment to act out of that growth. You know, there are some things in each of our lives where we can look and say, I know better now. Oh, if I could just go back and know what I know now. You know, that's not the way it works. But we do know better now. And so part of what goes on in the world, and certainly in our relationship with the world, is acting out of knowing better now. Here's a little thing I wanted to quote also from the last Windstar Journal. Payson R. Stevens said, "We, the peoples of the world, face a new responsibility for our global future. Through our economic and technological activity, we are now contributing to significant global changes on Earth within the span of a few human generations. We have become a part of the Earth system and one of the forces for Earth change. Whether we want to or not." I have a friend whose name is David Suzuki, who's a professor at the University of British Columbia. I talked to him about changes. I talked to him about our ability to recognize change, our willingness to cope with it, and also how, and the name of their program was The Challenge of Change. And in talking to their program and listening to some of the speakers, it seemed that what they were all doing was having people talk to them about changes that have taken place from their perspective and finding out how they can respond to those changes. And I suggested that there was another opportunity available, especially to people like that who had enormous resources available. And that was the opportunity to possibly that you spend your money, the kinds of things that you support and contribute to. So, one of the things that I want you to recognize about this weekend is that the people who are going to be speaking to you not only recognize the changes, are not only incredibly able to adapt and respond to those changes, but always do so in a way that effects change. They are true leaders in each of their fields, and as human beings for all of us. What they will say to you is going to key up stuff for you, as I mentioned earlier. I think that's the reality of our situation. If it does that, then perhaps you will find in yourself the opportunity not only to recognize the change, but to respond to it, and to begin in your life to effect change. A small group of people here, many of whom you saw on the screen a few moments ago last year, went out and had an effect in their community. Some of them have a very broad community. Some of them just have, the family and the places where they work, where they took it upon themselves to go share the video of our symposium last year, or to make a presentation of the state of our planet. All of these things came out. This was a catalyst for them. That's what I want it to be for you. I want you to find in yourself not only the recognition of changes, people who are changing things, but how you can do that. People are always asking me, well, what can I do? I don't want to tell anybody what to do. I have never wanted to tell people what to do. I want them to do what they are inclined to do. What comes up for you, because what comes up for you is the truth, is real, and will be effectual. And if you keep looking, if you know that beautiful quote up here, an empty mind, a beginner's mind, if you keep asking the question, if you keep looking, things will constantly come up. And then you need to have the courage to act on that. At this point in my presentation,
Power's out in Aspen.
Really?
Yeah, we won't have it for quite a while.
Wait. Power's out all over Aspen, so it may be a while before we get going. I don't want to put our other speakers through this particular thing, having to yell, not being able to see their notes, and they may have some visual things that they wanted to include also. And I want very much at some point this weekend for you to see the visual that I was going to present. But I'll take advantage of this time, and then we'll see if we get it back, and if not, we'll take a break in a few minutes, to do something that I didn't know if I was going to do this morning. Signs. They're all so I don't need to stand here. Now, I've only done this publicly twice. It's been an ongoing conversation in my life with my friends, with some contacts, on specific situations for about 20 years. Some of you may feel, after hearing this, like Johnny Carson talked about after watching Shirley MacLaine's TV series Out on a Limb, that perhaps she was missing a few veins in the windmills of her mind. So that's possible. Now, I don't want you to hear this as my perception of the way that it is. I don't want to tell you that. what I want you to do is listen to this openly, as I suggested earlier, and see if any of it rings in your heart. You know, that's all I want you to hear. Whether some little thing, a chord, gets plucked right down in here. Now, what this has to do with is change. If you look at events like AIDS, like the accident at Chernobyl last year, here are very real things that are representative of incredible change that's going to affect the whole planet, but happening very quickly. Now, that's going on. That's the reality. That's one aspect of change and our ability to deal with it. So I want to go totally to so that's as simple as I can be about looking at change, is what's going on all around us. Now I want to go to way over here, and perhaps it may be changes that you're not willing to look at, or there may be no evidence in your mind to support what I'm going to say, or it might pluck that little cord. So, from the time I was a child, I was interested in Atlantis. What was Atlantis? You know, I love the stories, the things that I read, and I read Edgar Cayce and all of this stuff. Then I started finding out about Lemuria. What was that? And Mu. What was that? Now, it's just something that started in my mind that I've always thought about, wondered about. And truly, one of the things that Windstar came out of was a vision that things were going to happen to our planet, changes that probably most people were not going to be able to handle. And I wanted to create a facility, a place that would be able to respond to these changes, to perhaps guide people through these changes. And I looked at them as planetary changes. So that's what I want to talk to you about. Real change. I see all the effort going on to get this light on for the video. I wonder if all of this happened so it couldn't be on video. So that this doesn't go out, you know, trying to tell people that that's how it is, but it goes out from you and how you respond to it. Anyway, I did a lot of thinking about this and have done some research, and I found out several things. In the process, I had a couple of ideas. How could something happen that, you know, every Aboriginal, indigenous society has legends of a pre-civilization, a prior civilization. Some of them, the Chinese, have 10 pre-civilizations. The Mayans have 5, I believe, of which this is the 4th. The Aztecs have 7, of which this is the 7th. But every civilization, if you look, will tell you stories of, there will be legends, there will be stuff about, like Atlantis. You see? Although different names. Now, how could that happen? And what could possibly happen that would destroy a civilization to the degree that we were starting all over again? I thought a lot about that. I didn't think it'd be a nuclear war because I've learned a little bit about plutonium and some of these things. And I don't see how the Earth, which as we understand is some 4.3 billion years old to get where we are today, could start over from that kind of a holocaust, if you will. So I wonder, what happened? I asked Bucky Fuller about the possibility that the Earth is a magnet. And magnets, to my knowledge, shift poles on a given frequency in a given cycle, depending on the size, the density, the purity of materials that make up the magnet. The Earth is a magnet. It has a north and south pole. Maybe it switches poles too. And if it does, how long does that take? And what might human beings do to affect that change? It's a cycle. It's built in. It's going to do it anyway. So what do we do that either affects that or recognizes it, and we live our lives accordingly to that possibility. So I asked Bucky about that, and he said he'd never thought about that, but yes, that was true. And did you know that over 85% of the heavy elements are now in the northern hemisphere? Did you know that? Over 85% of what we call the heavy elements are in the northern hemisphere, a product of development, industrialization, technology. So, boy, that seems like that's going to have some effect on that polarity, huh? And not only that, but see, in my opinion, when the Earth was formed, it was put out here and it stabilized itself. Now it's an unstable planet. We wobble in our orbit. We're not perfectly round, and what? Our orbit is the word. Thank you, Buzz. Our orbit around the sun is not a perfect circle. This is an unstable planet we live on. Now it balanced itself once, and maybe more times is what I'm trying to tell you. It had to balance itself. Well, I think that it's getting ready for a rebalancing. And, you know, if you look around you, look at 13 to 18 million people starving to death. Is that on a planet that produces enough food to feed twice the population? That doesn't sound like balance to me. Look at over 800 million people living in abject poverty, illiterate, without access to medicines and things that we take for granted. That doesn't sound like balance. Look at society spending $900 billion a year in weaponry out of our fear and insecurity of one another, an investment in that fear and insecurity. We in the United States spend close to $300 billion every year. If you don't count Saturdays and Sundays, that's $1 billion a day. That doesn't sound like balance to me. While we have 47,000 small family farms go out of business last year. Just about as many small family businesses, not farms, go down the drain. Doesn't sound like balance. And so then if you look at the weather and look at the droughts and stuff like that, this doesn't sound like balance. So it occurs to me that what we have done affects not only this cycle shift, but maybe it's not just 180 degrees. Maybe it's like that. And who knows? Nobody knows. But every civilization, aside from having stories of a pre-civilization, has a story about Noah. In Judeo-Christianity, it's Noah and Noah's Ark and the floods. But every other civilization has a guy who was like Noah. Now that's far out to me. I mean, really far out. And it seems to support this possibility, if you will. Now, I believe that everything has a purpose. And everything that happens in our life is purposeful. And that our lives are purposeful. And so I look at this kind of a change and I wonder what the purpose of it is. And especially if it's something that's built in. So anyway, through all of this stuff, talking to Jacques Cousteau about it and Bucky Fuller and doing some reading, talking to a few other people, I think that Atlantis is not a continent that sank in the Atlantic Ocean. I think that Atlantis was the name of the earth the last time around. And I think the time before that it was called Lemuria. And I think the time before that it was called Mu. And I think that these cycles are each about 10 million years. And I think that this thing, actually I found in the Encyclopedia Britannica, there's a thing that talks about the mid-Atlantic ridge where Earth is actually being born, and as it's spreading apart, as it comes up from the interior of the planet and is born, there are some 176 pieces of evidence in the layers, like we look out at layers like Mount Daly out here, and the geological pressure and how that is. But there are layers that show this, that prove this shift in polarity. I mean, it's proven, it's out there, that this occurs. So I think that's very interesting. Now then, the purpose of this. We begin as I am, consciousness. And that very first aspect of consciousness separates you from everybody else. I am. I am not you. As far as I can tell, I'm me. I understand you're like me, but you're not me. I am. So I think that we begin in separation, and a part of our path is to find completion, if you will, wholeness. That I am includes you and every other aspect of life on this planet. So I look at this thing as something that's built in, like the incredible intelligence that created all of this. Whether you call her God or not makes no difference to me. That there's built in something to sort of keep us from destroying ourselves and our potential for being here, which is what I think a nuclear weapon is, what nuclear weapons are about. They could blow up the earth, in my opinion. So what it's about then is recognizing the change, consciousness, and making the conscious shift from you or me to you and me. You know, if we can't do that out of 2 world wars, what does it take? What does it take to learn? If we can't do that out of the fact of 13 to 18 million of our brothers and sisters starving to death, 35,000 people every day. An earthquake happens in New Mexico, 10,000 people are killed. It's news all over the world. All kinds of things happen to help these people. 35,000 people starve to death every day. And we can do something about it. In many places in the world, we are doing something about it. About the nuclear arms race as being like 2 people sitting in a puddle of gasoline, spending all of their time, energy, and resources. Pretty far out, huh? And he says that, of course, we have to stop making matches. And of course, we want to get rid of the matches as quickly as we can. But more importantly, we want to get rid of that puddle of gasoline. Here, trust, security that we live in. Yet we continue to invest in that weaponry, not as my friend Bucky Fuller suggested, investing in living. Why, that's very interesting. So I look at all of this, and what does it take for us to learn together? It occurs to me that what's going on with the weather, the fact of change happening, it's ready to rebalance itself. And if we could get past all this stuff that separates us from one another, begin to join truly as human beings, we can probably figure that out. Find not only some peace in it, furthering in it. Recognize how then we, as this particular civilization on planet Earth, human beings now, can take the next step and not be forced back into beginning all over again, which is what I think happened. And there's a few people who built the pyramids, you know, and they had some knowledge and some information, and they hung around for years and years and years, a small group of people who kept alive the knowledge, if you will, so that when apes began evolving and gaining consciousness, there was somebody there to teach them. And I think it's happened 4 times before, and I think it's getting ready to happen again. And I think that Windstar is one of those places where the people who are here are going to be a part of sharing that knowledge about how to go through all of this. That's what I think is perfect. So anyway, that's part of what it is for me. Now, you know, I talk to people about this, and some say, you know, you are really out there. Because I have a passion about it, you know, and I've thought about it all my life, folks. Why does something like that get started in you when you're a little kid? Some little memory is plugged, you know, this thing Atlantis. That plugs me in someplace. And it's lived with me all of my life. and when I look at what's going on around me, and when I'm able to read and talk with other people, it all supports this notion that there are very real changes coming upon us as human beings on planet Earth. And I believe that I have a role to play in affecting those changes and being responsive to those changes. And part of that is how Windstar got created. Part of that is why I go around the world and sing. Part of that is why I'm so committed to the end of hunger on our planet, the end of nuclear weapons. These are the opportunities for us to begin to work together to dispel the environment of fear and mistrust that we live in. So, we're told that power is going to be on in 20 minutes, and we can continue our program then. I could talk for a little while longer, or we can take a break here. One thing with that, very, very kind to listen to all of this stuff. What we can do and the effect that we can have. Gene Houston, I think, is going to talk a little bit about that. And what I was going to show you was a video that goes with this song that I wrote that you heard last year called "What Are We Making Weapons For?" One of the things that I've done since then, as an opportunity to bring it out. I did an interview for the newspaper in San Antonio, Texas the other day, and it has to do with a little tour that I'm going on right after this symposium. And he asked me how come I was involved in so many things. Didn't I worry about spreading myself too thin, or that because you're doing all this stuff, people are going to stop listening to you? And I said, well, I thought about that, but it really seems to me, and the thing that I want to keep putting out there is that they're all related. They're all tied together. If you're concerned about the environment, you've got to be concerned about nuclear weapons in the world. If you're concerned about nuclear weapons in the world, you've got to recognize that it has to do with the environment. We have people who are, it's obscene what is happening to our environment, and our inability to find the budget, the finances, the resources to begin turning that around. One of the reasons we can't do that is because all those resources are being invested in weaponry over here, in my opinion. So it's all related. And I want to keep putting it out there. It's like the thing I said earlier about being an artist. If I can put something out here in a little thing, I talked with Joan Holmes about this. 10 years ago, when we began the Hunger Project, and before that, when Dick Gregory was actually the first guy who spoke to me about hunger on our planet and got me connected to that, all of a sudden, he plucked a string in here for me, and my life has been different ever since then. 10 years ago, when I was over in Europe, while serving on President Carter's Commission on World and Domestic Hunger, nobody asked me about hunger on the world. Nobody asked me about the Hunger Project. Nobody asked me about it. I had to work to get it into the interviews that I did. See, and one of the reasons that I continue working as hard as I do is I do get the chance to go all over the world and do interviews. If I'm doing a concert someplace, the newspaper wants to talk to me. Television wants to talk to me. And so I would force hunger into the interview, And sometimes what I had to say got repeated or mentioned, sometimes it didn't. And then the next time I was back, I'd get it in there again, or I'd get something about nuclear power and what I know of it, and nuclear weapons, and I'd get it in there again. And this whole idea of you and me, I kept getting that in. And then a couple years later, I'd be back, and now the first thing they ask me is, so what's going on with hunger? I understand you were in Africa over here. It has gotten to be the first thing that people talk to me about. The guy that I spoke to in San Antonio last week, said, I want to talk to you about your music and what's going on in your career, but first of all, I want to talk to you about all of these things you're involved in, and the symposium on choices for the future, and how did you get this recording in the Soviet Union? So that changes. The point of that is that there are a lot of people going out who are like that little ripple in the still surface, the pond, the mirror-like pond that most people live in, oblivion, everything's okay. It's all going to work out. I don't have to do anything. I'm just going to keep on living my life, doing like old Jimmy Buffett says. I want to do a good job, go home to my wife and kids, have a beer, and not get blown up. So that's where a lot of us are. I'd kind of like to do that. It's coming. So there are a lot of people, individuals, who for 10, 15, 20 years have been out there talking about this issue of hunger. And they've been throwing little pebbles in the pond. And all of a sudden that pond got so disrupted by the ripples created by each one of those pebbles that it created a new kind of listening. And all of a sudden, a couple of years ago, a BBC film on Ethiopia was shown on television, and for like the first time in history, people actually saw it. That story had been told before. We had been dealing with Ethiopia for years before that, some of us who were more involved in the issue. But all of a sudden, the listening was created, and people responded in an incredible manner. We are the Band-Aid, we are the world, Live Aid, Sport Aid, all of that stuff. But where is the issue today? Anybody read anything in the paper this morning about hunger? Probably not. So these things that we're going to talk about here this week, the choices that we can make as individuals, the opportunities that we have, not only to recognize the change and respond to it, but begin out of who and what we are, and our conviction, our commitment to being ourselves, and putting that on the line, taking that out of being a pebble in the pond, is going to affect change all over the planet in a positive kind of way. Like I said last year, we are the living place of incredible possibility. As we discover ourselves, as we expand our knowledge, as we make conscious choices, we can create the world that we've dreamed about forever and ever and ever. We can end hunger. We can eliminate AIDS. We can get rid of those nuclear weapons. We can begin to live in peace, in prosperity, in humanity, in spirituality. It is my sincere hope that what goes on here for you this weekend will be a catalyst toward that kind of activity in your lives. So, we're going to take how long? 30 minutes? I'm going to talk some more. 30 minutes, you think?
No.
Oh, it's a glorious day outside, folks. Let me say one additional thing, and perhaps we can show that when we come back. This is part of the introduction to communication. So you ask, you start looking for what you can do, and how can I demonstrate in my life these things that I feel, these things that I believe, and how can I do whatever is possible in me to live a sustainable life. Part of the imbalance of everything that I see out there is its lack of sustainability. I don't see a way in the world that we can sustain our lives. It can't happen. We spend 50 cents of every dollar you spend on food is spent on getting it there. It takes 80 gallons of gasoline to grow an acre of corn. They grew corn back before they discovered gasoline, as far as I... So, the best thing that I think I've done in my career, and perhaps in my life, this instance they're totally connected, was an initiative, a private initiative to go to the Soviet Union. There are many places around the world where they call me the voice of America. And I felt that perhaps they see what they think of America, or what they would like to think about America, in me and my music. I know that music is a universal language, and I know that people everywhere are the same, truly. Mothers and fathers are like mothers and fathers everywhere. Children are like children everywhere. Lovers everywhere.
So I went to the Soviet Union, had an incredible moving experience, and out of it came a song. And it was pretty wonderful finding a song for me. Quite often that's the completion of something moving in my life, is giving it a form in words and music. But on this particular occasion, it wasn't enough. And so last fall, in October, during the time I was in the Soviet Union with Jerry Jampolsky and Diane Sorensioni on their Children as Teachers of Peace program, I had made arrangements to record with a friend of mine whose name is Alexander Grodsky, who is a singer-songwriter in the Soviet Union, the most popular male singer-songwriter in the Soviet Union. Sasha's, he's known to close to 100 million people, and I cemented our relationship one night after we had first met. I did a concert at the American Ambassador's residence in Moscow, and a lot of people came to this concert, people that the American Ambassador had not yet met, who had stayed away during the 6 years of his tenure at that time. And we went back to his place that night after the concert, Sasha's place, and sat in his little apartment drinking vodka and playing Beatles songs. Now, he doesn't speak or understand English, but he knew every Beatles song that I knew and more, and we sat and sang until about 4 in the morning. I sent him a guitar after that, and then with his help on that end, and some other friends that I made over there, last October, I recorded this song that I'd written previously, What Are We Making Weapons For, or Let Us Begin, in a studio in Moscow. It's the first time, to my knowledge, an American and a Soviet artist have recorded together. It's the first time that a record was released, and you may not believe this because I know you haven't heard it, but a record was released simultaneously on Melodia Records in the Soviet Union, which is the only record label they have, and on RCA Records in the United States. Simultaneously, these records went out, this recording. And we made a video. And again, I think that the combination of the video, the song itself, and the fact of it being sung by people from two really different parts of the world, but two people who recognize that we all feel the same, is the best thing that I've done in my career. And I wanted to share that with you this morning as an aspect of individuals taking it another step further and asking, what can I do now? Okay, I did that now, what can I do? It was a very courageous thing that Sasha did over there and the people who helped me do it. And it's a pretty wonderful story and how it all happened anyway. We'll take a break now for about 15 or 20 minutes. All right, to just sort of notice what's going on. Please enjoy the glorious day that we have outside. Thank you for your patience with our little problem. Thank you for letting me talk. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in a few minutes, everybody.